Hey scholars, this is our public speaking anxiety workshop video. So hopefully you have the PowerPoint lecture out in front of you. That PowerPoint lecture, of course, is available with this module where this video is available. So what I'll be doing is I'll be looking at the same exact PowerPoint that you're looking at, and I'll be going through it. So basically, we're like kind of going through it at the same time. So make sure you have that out in front of you as we're going along. Hit the pause button if you need to. So that second slide. Shows the agenda. So what we'll be doing in the video, I'll be giving you a review of public speaking anxiety. I've already talked about it in other videos, but I'll still give you just an overview, a shorter overview. And then I'll be discussing a theoretical approach to deal with public speaking anxiety. So you'll just see PSA usually throughout the rest of this PowerPoint. So PSA is a lot more brief. So we'll just be discussing an alternative way of thinking about public speaking anxiety according to this article that I provide the reference for below. Rotine Flaherty is the one who I found this article that they wrote on participatory sketching as a tool to address students' public speaking anxiety, and I found it in Communication Teacher. I've been doing this workshop now from adapted from her article. I've been doing it for about 3 years now. And the first time I did it, I was like, man, this is so different. I hope my students like it. And almost always, all my students really enjoy it. I haven't had any students say like, yeah, I didn't like it. I will say it's a little bit different. It's gonna at some points it might feel a little bit uncomfortable because we're talking about something like your any sort of insecurities or anxieties or whatever you might have that centers around public speaking. But the whole point of this workshop is to manage that. And I will tell you this: it's not like my goal is. I'm not going to guarantee you that you're going to get rid of it. Like you will eliminate your fear of public speaking anxiety after this workshop. No, that's not the goal. That's not the point. It's not likely that that would ever happen. You'll still experience the different effects of PSA throughout the rest of your life. Even I do. And a recent video that I just recorded, it was funny. I was at home recording myself, but I just felt like the same feeling I get if I was doing a presentation in front of a large audience. And I was like, why do I feel that way? I don't know. And I think part of it's because I hadn't recorded a video in like a few days, maybe like 5 days or something like that. Whereas if I'm doing a couple a day, after a few days, it just feels more natural. But anyways, my point is the goal is not to eliminate it. It might never go away, but you learn how to manage it because the thing is it's adrenaline. So anyways, that's the theoretical approach. The sketching activity, that's the thing that you'll be sketching on your own, and then you'll be turning that into our course page, and then a debrief. So the goal, the big kind of one of the big goals is to review public speaking anxiety, just to remind yourself of it, and demystify the whole process to sort of like to get you to realize how much control you have over your public speaking anxiety. Easier said than done, but the goal kind of is just to demystify it. What a lot of students have commented on this workshop is they say like, oh, once I sketched out my fears of PSA, I realized it was so silly, or I realized, oh my gosh, I don't know why I thought that. So hopefully you have a similar positive experience. And again, the goal one of the goals is to give you tools and knowledge for how to manage this kind of thing. So on the slide 4, one thing to remember about public speaking anxiety or PSA is that we're dealing with a performance, right? You're being watched, you're being evaluated. If you've played sports before and you're doing some sort of an individual performance where you have to go and do something for a few minutes and a group of judges watch you, I mean, it's a lot different than, let's say, other types of sports where they're performance based, but it's not like, hey, I'm going to watch what you do for 5 minutes and you're getting judged, like group sports. Although if you're in group sports, at some point you might be getting looked at by a scout or something like that. You might know that someone's watching you for a specific reason other than just being a team player. And it's like, wow, I've done this 1,000 times. I've played this game so much, but when I'm being evaluated, and someone's like taking a pen and paper, then it can create this sort of level of anxiety because it's a performance. So when you're presenting information, you want to begin with confidence, use appropriate gestures. I've talked about this before. Gestures should come naturally. Hand gestures, facial expressions, they should come naturally. But the way that you get into that is by knowing your topic and knowing your presentation and knowing what you're doing, and then being willing to get outside your comfort zone, because it definitely feels uncomfortable at times to speak with your public speaking voice, because it's not the way that you typically talk. The way I'm talking right now on the camera, this is not the way I talk if I'm just talking to my kids about how how their day was at school, or if I'm talking to my wife about what we're having for dinner. But it's my public speaking performance voice, right? And that's different than the way you typically talk. You don't need to be as aware of things like gestures and eye behavior and whatnot. Managing your eye behavior, as I've been mentioning to you, the most important thing is that you're engaging with the camera lens, not reading anything, only referencing your index card when you really need it. And then when you do reference your card, sometimes you just lose your place. You're like, oh, where was I looking? It's almost like expect that to happen, because that way when it does, you're not really thrown off. Because what some students do is they lose their place and they're like, oh, sorry. And like, oh, man. They get so upset and frustrated. And I'm kind of like, who cares? Like, I'm not grading you down. A student lost their place on their index card, -5 points. I don't do anything like that. So if you're up here and you lose your place, you simply just pause. You don't even look at the camera. If it's like really bad and you have no idea where you are, like, yeah, start over. But if you lose your place for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, you don't have to talk about it. You just find your place and then go back. And you don't acknowledge it, because chances are the audience won't even think that you made a mistake. You might be the only one that knew who you made the only one who's aware that you made a mistake. And then, of course, managing your voice and managing nervousness, they're all part of performance. So this is a photo of stage fright. I'm pretty sure is in a couple other PowerPoint lectures, right? You see this person who is has this very unrealistic perception of what he's experiencing from the audience. The people in the audience are actually much larger than him, looking down, which is ironic because he's the one on stage looking down at them. But his psychological perception is, oh my gosh, I feel like everyone's like looking down on me in a condescending way. Oh my gosh, I feel the heat from the spotlight. And for those of you who have presented on stage, I've only been on stage like, I don't know, maybe once or twice. So I don't really know what it's like to speak on stage, but from what I've heard, it can be challenging, like blinding lights in your eyes or the heat of it, right? And then your senses are heightened when you're giving a speech, so it might just amplify the degree to which you feel like you're hot and sweating. You feel like your legs are wobbly, right? So let's say this was your sketch. It's like, hey, this is the way that I sketch public speaking anxiety. This is the way that I experience it. I don't expect your sketches to be at this level or this caliber of artistic ability, which better than stick figures, right? A lot of students will draw stick figures and shapes and images and word bubbles or thought bubbles and whatnot. That's fine too. But I'm just showing you how like one person might experience stage fright. I've had a student before he'd get up there, and great guy, international student from Italy, from Spain, but so full of life. But when he would go up and talk, he would say, "I can't feel my legs. They're so wobbly." And I would look at him and I'm saying, they're not moving. And he'd look at his legs and say, "I feel like they're moving all over the place." And the whole class was kind of laughing with him, not at him. But it was just illustrating the fact that the way you experience the PSA is different for everybody. I had a student once who gave a speech and he was like sweating. He was like literally like dripping sweat, like coming down his forehead, his neck, his face, and all over his shirt and stuff like that. And it wasn't hot. It wasn't a hot classroom. It was a night class, and it was a cool night, I think. And the whole class could, we could all see it. We're like, oh my gosh, he kept wiping. So I think what I told him is like, hey, for your next speech, don't wear a collared shirt with a tie where it's really tight. Wear something light and loose. Anyhow, we all experience it differently. On to the next slide, slide 6. Stage fright, it's the anxiety of the prospect of giving a speech in front of an audience. So it's like stimulus response, right? When you sit down to go rehearse your speech, or you'll be standing, so you need to be standing while you're giving your speech, right before you hit that record button, or like shortly before you hit the record button, maybe a minute or so, maybe a few minutes before. In your head, at some point in your head, you're gonna be like, okay, I'm about to record my speech. At that moment in your mind, your brain tells your body, okay, let's prepare the adrenaline. So the adrenaline machines, the adrenaline engines start to get going, and you start feeling it in your body. You're like feeling it in your arms and your breathing, and you feel like, okay, this would be great to go run a race, right? But I'm not. I'm going to be standing and moving around and looking at a camera lens. So it's almost like from a physical perspective, from your body's perspective, it's almost like your body's saying like, hey, wait, normally when I get all this adrenaline, I do something. I run, I jump, I lift, I do whatever sport you might do or physical exercise that you might do. But now I'm just sort of stationary. So like I said before, prior to giving your speech, prior to the time when you're going to be recording it, or even when you're rehearsing it, prior to those rehearsal sessions, exercise, do some jumping jacks, some push-ups, some burpees, some stretches, walk around the block, do some things to get the blood flowing. And that way, when you get the blood flowing, in theory, you have all this sort of adrenaline like pooling. One person I work with, she said, like, the way I think of it is that when I'm sitting, if students are just sitting in their desks and they know their speech is coming up, they're just sitting in their desk and there's just like this adrenaline is just like pooling, you know. And then you go up to give your speech and you're like, oh, I feel it all right here, and you're like, oh, I can't think. So one thing I used to tell my students is in the classroom, hey, before you give your speech, whatever time we're meeting for the speeches, before you get to the classroom, do some exercises, stretching, walk around the block, or even as you're sitting in your desk, you can be like stretching your legs or stretching your arms, breathing exercises, etc. There's a lot of physical things that you can do, especially from home. There's a lot of things that you can do to prepare for the speech. So it's normal. Is what I'm talking about. It's a completely normal, physiological, bodily, thing. So that's stage fright, right? So another way to think about public speaking, PSA, public speaking anxiety, is through the lens of relational cultural theory, RCT, and that's from Jordan 2000. And this is the information that was provided in the Ratine Flaherty article. So based on this theory, some of the premises are that as humans, we have a desire for connection with other people. We're relational beings. We crave for relationship. We crave for connection and communication and intimacy and all those things from the moment before we're born, even before we're born. Unborn children will have this desire to connect with the outside world, to connect with other humans. So keep that in mind. Another component to understanding this topic of PSA is that we have this autonomy in this day and age. The autonomy, the degree to which we experience autonomy and independence and self-sufficiency can oftentimes make it difficult to connect on a personal level, especially right now in these days and times with the restrictions that we have with physical connections. So when it comes to this topic of public speaking anxiety, it's a vulnerable topic. Discussing it when students share about it in class or when I talk to students about it, it's uncomfortable. It's almost like shameful. And I would tell anybody, like, do not be shamed. Do not feel shameful. And I'm not saying that if you do feel shameful, there's something wrong with you. Rather, what I'm saying is you don't need to feel ashamed of the fact that it's like, oh, it's just such an uncomfortable topic. We're revealing a side of ourselves that is a very delicate thing. It's a very vulnerable topic. Like this activity that when prompted to do this activity, oh, my body does all these weird things and I don't know what to do with it. So talking about it can be challenging. So that's according to this relational cultural theory. You need to feel safe to express that. And this type of activity, this kind of workshop, even though it's online, even though that you're doing it for the most part by yourself, it's still creating that environment for you to express your vulnerability through art, through sketching. And kind of the logic is that when you discuss one of these uncomfortable topics in a safe environment, that leads to empowerment. You learn about it, you demystify it, you realize, oh wow, I never thought about public speaking anxiety like this before, like the other students did. So man, I have a totally different approach to how I see this. And those are some of the comments that I've been getting from students over the last few years when they do this assignment. So that's the theoretical approach. That's one way to think about public speaking anxiety in terms of how to manage it. On to slide 8. So this is an anecdotal approach. is what you're doing is you're managing butterflies. You're not eliminating them. Don't try to eliminate them. Hey, if they go away, great. But the goal is, hey, when I recognize them, when they come about, when they come out, when I'm about to give my speech, learn how to manage them, how to control them, how to tame them. I like this photo of these butterflies here. The butterflies that you see in this photo, it's actually an art installation of magnetic butterflies. So to sort of my way of sort of working with this metaphor is like the person who created this actual art installation. He didn't try to eliminate. He can't tame the butterflies to do this. So he got a creative approach and he used magnets. How do I manage the butterflies? They're not going to go away, right? So how do I manage them? Create magnets. So it's sort of my own sort of twist on the metaphor. Point is, you might have the butterflies come out. How do I manage them? How do I create those magnets? How do I get them to be in a particular position? Through this exercise, through all the exercises that I'm talking about, stretching, singing, warming up your voice, all those things that I talk about in the videos, the mouth exercises, the voice exercises, all those things are tools that will help you to manage the butterflies. That's that. So slide 9, the actual activity. So this is something that you will need supplies for. So you might need to, you could finish listening to this PowerPoint and you might need to go to the store. You might need to like make a trip to the store to get some supplies before you're able to complete it. But that's fine. You can just, I would say, keep watching the video and keep taking notes. I recommend that you're taking notes. You can always rewatch the video, rewatch parts of the video. But yeah, keep watching the rest and I'll tell you the activity, and then you can go to the store later and then finish the assignment. So it might be a 2-part thing for you. What you'll need is sketching supplies. So paper. Doesn't matter really what kind of paper you use. I would say like use some sort of like copy paper, printer paper that's white or that's easy to see your sketch. And then you'll need a variety of colored markers, colored pencils, crayons, whatever you want to do, that's fine. But the whole point is you're strategically using the different colors to represent different things that you're experiencing. So the idea is you use colors to represent emotions and behaviors you experience while public speaking. And so I'll show you some examples from other students I've had. The whole idea is to be examining the thought that you're putting behind the way that you're sketching things. So try to have fun, try to be creative, and know that you're not being graded on artistic ability. In case you're wondering what I'm drinking, a little bit of a combination of hibiscus liqueur and tangerine juice. It's very tasty. Anyhow, you're not being graded on artistic ability. So some students see see some of the samples that I provide and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't draw that. That's totally cool. I am not artistic at all in terms of sketching or drawing. That's a weak point for me. So don't think that you have to draw something that's really fancy or anything like that. So yes, step 2, now you take all your supplies and you're sketching your interpretation or your like how PSA is manifested in you, in your public speaking experiences, from the first speech that we had, from other speeches that you've had, more generally, like what do you think about, etc. And I say most students spend anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. I mean, I'd say take the time to put the thought behind the sketch. A lot of students seem to have a sort of like a cathartic approach. I feel like they really benefit from taking the time to put like so much effort and detail into sketching something that really is something that they are struggling with or that they're working through. At least that's what they've told me and that's what they've commented on in the past. So slide 11. Slide 11, this is what was provided in the research article that I used, that I adapted this activity for. So this is what one student submitted. They're a stick figure in the back. They feel the light on them. They have a thought bubble with question mark, like, what am I thinking? It could be a number of things. It's you. It's as long as it makes sense to you and it's representative of what you experienced. There's no one correct way to do this. That next one, you see the stick figure. It's just like one large stick figure. Like, you see pink cheeks and sweat like dripping, and you see butterflies in the stomach, and those marks around the hands and knees to indicate that they're shaking, and even like pee. I know the sound, some students might laugh or chuckle at this, but I include this to show you what some students think about. They're like, oh my gosh, what if I pee? I mean, some students, they think about the worst case scenario that might happen while giving a speech, and it usually never does. Like I've told you, I've evaluated in my time with public presentations, I've evaluated around 5,000, and in 5,000, I've never seen that happen. But I've seen so many different things that happen, and it's because everyone experiences PSA differently. So you're sketching the way that you experience it. I have had a couple students say they almost fainted, and then I did have a student, one student once was giving a speech, and he had like a pen or pencil, and the whole time he was just he was tapping his pencil on the desk in front of him, like, and it was loud. That's the rubber eraser, but he had a pen. I think he was hitting the pen on the table the whole speech, and the whole class was looking at me like, they're like, what, like, what's going on? And I'm looking at them like, I don't know. I've never seen that before. And the whole time he was giving the speech, he was just like tapping the thing. I didn't really understand it, but I told him afterwards, excuse me. I went up to him afterwards and I said, hey, I can't think of his name. This was 12 years ago. And I said, hey, were you aware that you were tapping your pencil or whatever it was? And he's like, no, I had no idea. I mean, and he was well prepared. He was wearing a suit and tie. It was so evident that he was very, very well rehearsed. He practiced a ton. He did a pretty good job, but he just looked so scared. He has so much nervousness, and so he was doing this thing that he wasn't even aware of. So in his sketch, he might draw something like that. I've had some students. What I do in the class, when I do this in the classroom, I put students in groups, and then they all share with each other, and they all share with the class. So everyone sees each other's sketches. So don't think like, oh, I don't want anyone to see it. Like, the whole idea is this is a vulnerable topic, but you're showing it to me, and this is the kind of thing where every student seems to really benefit when they see other students' work. The more samples you see, the more you realize, oh my gosh, the way that different people experience PSA is so diverse, and that's why I'm showing you a variety of samples. So yeah, that's slide 13. Slide 13 is that one that I talked about in the beginning. Maybe yours looks something like this, or like slide 14. Maybe it looks like the ones that are in the article, stick figures. But the main objective of the exercise is to examine the thought behind the drawing, not the quality of the sketch itself. It's all about, like, it's personal. So spend time doing that. Now I have some samples from other students in the past of things that they drew. And I'm showing you these because these represent some patterns that I've seen. So I've seen a lot of sketches now. Now that I've been doing this for 3 years, I've seen several hundred. One pattern I've seen is lots of students will draw different variations of like sets of eyes looking at them. And we talked about this in class, and they say like, oh, it kind of just feels like everyone's looking at me. It's like, well, we all are looking at you, but there's some sort of like weird connection with the way that people are looking at you. And so when you draw it out, and you sketch it, and you write about it, you think about it, you realize, well, everyone's looking at you, but they're not thinking what you think they're thinking. But I'm just showing you these to give you some samples. Slide 16, you see the guy that's on the platform, and he's standing on this platform with like this trapdoor kind of thing, and he's like standing on top of a shark tank. And I've actually seen a variety of students have done sketches where there's sharks below them, where it feels like you're walking above sharks. And I think part of that, based on some discussions in classes, is like the fear of sharks is such a great fear, right? If you were to fall into a shark tank, that fear you would have is almost like paralytic. And some students will sort of have that sort of like paralytic fear. They're giving their speech and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time breathing, right? If you start off your speech that way, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe, maybe just pause, stop your speech. Take a breather. Do some breathing exercises. Take some time off, like maybe write a journal, say a prayer, do some exercise, do whatever might, talk to yourself in the mirror, have a positive visualization. right? Try to learn how to work with that. Try to learn how to coexist with those feelings. Like, okay, I feel the feelings of fear, but there are no sharks below me. Just because it feels like that, obviously there aren't. So how do I like manage that adrenaline and channel it in the right direction? Like the 17, you have this audience, right, where everyone's in the audience and they're just saying all these things, like that's so embarrassing. No one cares about what you're saying. A lot of students will write these things with these thought bubbles, right? The next one is slide 18. Slide 18 shows all these circles, all these heads, but then all these like thoughts that are coming to the speaker's mind, like she's wearing a mask, like no one really knows who she is. They think she's childish, illiterate, train wreck, ugly, slow, like all these horrible things. And I'm showing you this because this is what a lot of students write about. And it's something that I think that really needs to be dealt with. You have to like deal with this. What a lot of students write is like, I write all this stuff out. It was emotional. It was an emotional experience. It felt uncomfortable. That after I had it all out on the paper, it felt good to just sort of get rid of it. Just sort of it's an outlet. Like sketching about it and submitting it to this assignment module. It's like you're getting credit for it. Okay, I did this thing. I realize now, hopefully in theory, you're thinking, wow, like I understand the way I experience PSA so much better, and it's not going to go away, but man, when it comes up, I'll learn how to manage it. All those thoughts, cocky, people pleaser, immature, all those things that I'm thinking, or that I'm thinking the students are thinking, they're not thinking that. What one student wrote in one of her sketches from a while ago was, and it's something that I haven't seen a lot. One student wrote she had a thought bubble from an audience member, or she had a thought bubble from the speaker. The speaker, like her, the speaker had a thought bubble, and the thought bubble said something like, "They're probably just more concerned about their own speeches." And that, in other words, like the looks I'm getting, if I'm the speaker, the looks I'm getting from the audience, I'm looking at the audience and I'm like, man, I feel like they think that I'm stupid. They want me to stop talking, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, the people in the audience, they're probably thinking about their own speeches. I mean, and they are. And so as an audience member plays a vital role in encouraging the speaker, but you can't rely on an audience to be encouraging to you, because it's nice when that happens, but that doesn't always happen. A lot of times you're going to get an audience, you're going to have distractions, so you have to learn how to push through that. But it's important to know that most people in the audience, they're not thinking any of the things that you think that they're thinking. And this is a conversation that I brought up in my classes for years. Like, no one's thinking that. And if they are, then shame on them. And that's not something that I've seen. What I've experienced is like everybody is each other's cheerleader. That's what I've experienced. I've really seen the positive. Everyone wants to help everyone do better. So that's something to be aware of. But just being raw, being raw and vulnerable and sketching out these fears you have can really be good for you. And then I had a student who, she was quite the artist with the monkey. Um, it made me laugh, but she's a very creative, artistic person. But so yeah, some people get really, really creative. If you like art, graphic design, some like one student actually made almost like it was like a video, and she or it was like a animated photo representation or something like that. It was really cool. And then she sent me a video on how she actually made it on her editing software. So really cool. Or stick figures. Stick figures work fine. Again, the point is to examine the thought behind the drawing, not the quality of the sketch itself. A couple years ago, or about over a year ago, I had a student doing this, and he presented his sketch to the classroom. This was fall 2019, so last semester before COVID. I hate using that as a time reference, but now it's relevant to say those things. But anyways, the student was showing the sketch to the class, and it was him on a canoe, and he was in this little sea of green. It was like a green sea, and there was like an island. And what he said was, this is how I feel when I'm having PSA, public speaking anxiety. He's like, basically, I'm in this canoe, and I'm in a sea of my own puke, of my own vomit. Like I'm in a sea of my own vomit, and I'm trying to like get towards this island of safety. And he explained it so well to the whole class, and he definitely didn't look like he had PSA as he was talking. He was a very competent talker, and he seemed very confident in himself, and he had good public speaking abilities. One of on a high level. And I asked him, I said, hey, is that how you felt when you gave your speech last week? Because he had just done a speech the week before. I said, is that how you were feeling during that speech the other week? And he said, yeah, that's how I felt. And I was just like, you see, class, that's what's going on. Like, you have these students who they're doing really well, but deep down inside, this is the thing that they're struggling with. I believe he said after the sketching activity, it helped him, definitely helped him a lot with managing the anxiety, but I can't recall exactly. But anyways, everyone experiences it differently. So the activity itself, slide 21, what I'd like for you to do, if it's possible, talk through your sketch. Now, I would say if there's someone who's willing to listen to you, someone that you know and you can trust and you love, and they love and support you, maybe ask them, hey, can I talk through this with you? Because you're talking about something that's sensitive and vulnerable, talking about anxiety and talking about like fears of public speaking. You don't have to do that, but I encourage you to, if there's someone like that in your network who you think would be useful to speak with about this. If not, do it by yourself. Talk to yourself. Just talk out loud. What is it? What's the sketch? What are the reasons why you drew this? Just kind of talk through the thing, just to make sense out of what you drew. And then what you're actually doing for the assignment module, the work that you will actually submit, is you can just write it in a Word document or however you want to submit the work. But you'll be answering these 4 questions on slide 22. These 4 questions, you can have like one paragraph per question, or you can include all of it in one long essay if you want to write it in essay format. I'm not too concerned about the format as much as I am the quality of your answer and the content of your answer. So after you're all done, sketching and thinking about your sketch and sort of, reflecting on your sketch and, your public speaking experiences of the past, after you've done that, now you'll write about it. How did you feel about sketching your fears of public speaking anxiety? So for each one of these questions, I say write a few sentences. You don't have to write a long essay type response, but it should be, a fairly detailed answer, but you can still be concise. What was it like? Talk about the experience, because this is, I will say, as in terms of all the types of assignments that you can do in a classroom, this is very different. I don't know of anyone else who does this. It's very unusual, but I'm unusual also, so I like doing unusual things because oftentimes it leads to good results through trial and error. So, how'd you feel about it? Question 1. Question 2. You're primarily talking about the emotions and physiological responses. And it's not the same as question 1. Question 1, you might talk about your emotions, but talk more broadly. Like, what was it like? Just take me through that experience. And the question 2 is like specific emotions, whether it's fear or anger or sadness or whatever the case may be. Like, describe the specific emotions, and then physiological responses, breathing, your temperature. Did you feel flush? Did you get dry mouth? Were you sweating? Talk about that. And so be mindful of those things as you're going through this workshop. And then one thing that a lot of students get, and I'm sort of a tangent, but it's relevant. One thing I've noticed with lots of students over the years, and I won't go into detail about it, but one thing I've noticed as a very common physiological response that I've seen is oftentimes I see people will get very flush. They'll turn red in different parts of their body, like different parts of, like from the shoulders up. So I see people get flush and red, like on their collarbone or around their neck, all around their neck or cheeks or ears or forehead, like in almost like patchy areas. So if that's you, if you're like, oh my gosh, I totally get that, just know that in my experience of doing this for 15 years, I've seen that a lot. It's very, very, very common, but it's one that's very, very visible and very obvious to see. Just so you know, if that happens to you, however your nervous behavior is manifested, I don't necessarily grade down on that. If it affects the performance of your speech, then that's another issue. But if it's just like, I see a person turns red, or I see that they're sweating, or I see that their hands are kind of shaky, well, I'm not grading down for shaky hands. If you have shaky hands, just be mindful of the note card, right? Question 3, how has your attitude toward PSA changed? Maybe change a little, maybe it didn't change at all, but just comment on that. And then the last one, what was the most useful insight that you gained from this activity? So that's that. that'll be its own separate module on our course page for an assignment. So this debrief again would be something that you would do on your own if you live with people, if you have roommates, family members who you want to talk to, or at the very least, like go through it on your own. Slide 24. What did you learn that was new, interesting, unexpected, empowering? Hopefully you feel a little bit more empowered after this. Some of these questions are kind of redundant to what you're doing for the assignment. How did you feel? How have your attitudes changed? And so on and so forth. Managing your speaker anxiety. I've already talked a lot about this. Physical exercises, experience. Just know that the only way you get really good is by lots and lots of practice. Being prepared is one of the key things for managing your speaker anxiety, managing your public speaking anxiety, your PSA. If you're not prepared, if you're just trying to wing it, or it's a premature like version of your speech, you're not ready to record the final version, it's going to sort of systematically enhance and magnify and exacerbate whatever sort of nervous behaviors that you have. Regardless, I would say, of your proficiency. If you have a lot of experience public speaking, you might be better at like winging it. But if it's me, everyone's different. If I were to wing something, if I knew I had to give some sort of a 3-minute talk to an audience, if I didn't prepare anything and I just try to wing it, I'm gonna have like a massive amount of public speaking anxiety. And for me, it's like it's my breathing. Like I feel like I won't be able to breathe. Just because I have a lot of experience doesn't mean I can just wing it. I'll still prepare something. It'll be easier for me to prepare than for someone who's doing it for the first time, just because I have the experience. But those are some ways to manage public speaking anxiety. But basically, you gotta do what works for you. That slide 27, 28. What the research shows is some of the best public speakers, they acknowledge that. They acknowledge the feelings of fear and inadequacy. Like sometimes you just can't escape the fact that they surface. But once they surface, it's you don't have to like you don't have to validate them. You don't have to like give them any sort of like truth. Don't you can acknowledge the fact that they're there. Like, hey, I'm aware of the fact that I have the anxiety, but I know what I'm doing. I've rehearsed this. I've practiced this. I'll just have to sort of like coexist with the anxiety. Like I'm aware of my breathing, but as I get into my speech, as I'm using my voice and my body and gestures and expressions, etc., that's actually going to start to sort of draw like that physical exhaustion from having a very dynamic voice and using a dynamic body. That's going to start to draw from that adrenaline, right? At a much slower pace than if you were running a sprint. But it's kind of like you start the speech, you're prepared and it's going well, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, you feel the adrenaline going, and then it's kind of like a roller coaster, and then you're like, okay, I'm good, and then you'll start to like slowly start to pull from that adrenaline tank again, and in theory you're going to give a great speech. Easier said than done, but do what works best for you. Be sure to utilize that communication YouTube page that I provided, that resource for communication coach Alex Lyon. He's a professor in our same study in the communication studies discipline. He's at a school in New York. But his website has tons of great videos on all things public speaking and whatnot. So this was a lot. This was long-winded, but I really wanted to emphasize how important this is, because this is one of the things, like public speaking anxiety is one of the things that can be crippling to students, which affects their whole experience giving the speech, and then oftentimes their grade. Because if they're not engaging and getting dynamic with the camera, and they're not able to convey the story, it can affect their ability to just like get the assignment done. But anyhow, hopefully this was useful for you. Hopefully it's something that you reflect on and you realize like, wow, that was really good for me to like go through that vulnerable experience and sketch my fears of public speaking anxiety in this very uncommon, unusual type of context. So thanks for participating, and I look forward to seeing your sketches and your responses in our course module. Talk to you later. Bye.